Well, thank you for joining me, Michaela.
Yeah, thanks, Bonnie.
Could you please introduce yourself and your business and where you're located?
Sure. My name is Michaela Ristaino, and I am primarily located in Sarasota, Florida. My business name is Ristaino Photography, and I spend a few months out of the year up in New Hampshire, so I am available for sessions here, but typically the bulk of my business and my sessions happen in Sarasota, Florida, or thereabouts.
Can you talk about how you got into photography in general and then maybe specifically the niches that you work with now?
Yeah. So kind of got into it roundabout. I mean, I'm gonna say going back probably 10 to 15 years ago, my husband got me a little DSLR Canon Rebel camera for my birthday. And, I loved taking pictures of nature and flowers and things like that, and really didn't know what I was doing with the camera too much at that point. But really, really enjoyed learning about it and learning about the different manual settings and all of that kind of stuff. But how I sort of made the transition into portrait photography, my background is actually in music. So I have a college degree in vocal performance and have been a singer performer for pretty much my whole life. And because of that, I have many, many friends who are singers, performers, actors. And a very good friend of mine reached out to me, probably, again, we're going back 12, 13 years ago. And she said, hey, money's really tight. I need new headshots. I know you got a camera. Can you take headshots for me? And I was like, no, I don't take pictures of people. That's not what I do. And she was really desperate. And she kind of said, well, do you want to just try it? I mean, like, what's the worst? She's like, what's the worst that could happen? If they're terrible, I don't use them. And if they're good, then maybe you'll find something else that you like to photograph. And I won't say that they were phenomenal, but they worked for what she needed. And I actually realized that I loved taking portraits. I think that where I really shine is in the seniors and branding and headshots. I find that when I'm able to work one-on-one with somebody, that we can really create a connection, and therefore that comes through in the photos.
Okay, well, what advice would you give to someone if they're on the hunt for, let's say, branding or a senior photographer? What advice would you give them to help point them towards someone who's perfect for them?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think many of us immediately go to Google, especially if we don't have somebody, if we haven't heard of somebody, word of mouth or whatever. So I think obviously the first thing is you should look into the photographers whose work you are most drawn to. And then the second thing is, you can always reach out via email by a first step, but I think having an actual conversation with them is really the next step that you should take. And the reason for that is we all know that we get along with some people great, and we don't necessarily always drive with everybody. And any photographer that's worth their weight in anything will give you the time for a phone call or a Zoom call or meet you for coffee or whatever it is, because I think there are people out there now. I think more than ever, we have people who are starting their own businesses and having to brand themselves. And for many of those people, having to be in front of the camera is a really personal thing, and it's really can be a tough thing for some people. So to know that you kind of jive with the photographer that you're going to work with, and you feel comfortable with them and you can trust them to create your vision, is really important. And I don't think there's any way that you can determine that unless you actually have something other than email. Like, you have to talk to them, whether, like I said, whether it's a phone call or Zoom, any of those will work.
So you are a part-time photographer. Can you describe what that means for you and your business and how you set it up and how other people might view that from the outside?
Sure. I'm someone who has been working in a corporate job for 20 some years. And so the benefit of that, and we talked about this briefly before we started recording, for a long time, I felt like, oh, I really shouldn't charge very much because I don't really need, I don't need this money to pay the bills. And it's just sort of fun money for me. It goes back into my business. It goes to paying for education, for camera upgrades, for computer upgrades, whatever. And I had a conversation with a wildly talented photographer, a friend of mine in New York City. And she basically said to me, because you're already working full time, that's all the more reason why you should charge what you're worth. Because at some point, my day job will likely go away, and I want to be able to continue to do photography. And there becomes a point where it has to be worth your time. It has to be like, what is it going to take for me to take a Saturday out from my family, or a Sunday morning to do mini sessions away from my family? And I think what consumers need to know, what clients need to know is, just because your photographer may not do photography full time doesn't mean that they haven't invested in the gear, the education, the software, all of those things.
Okay, well, tell people where they can find you online, how can they get a hold of you or follow you.
Yeah, sure. So let's see. Oh my gosh, my website is www.ristainophotography.com. You can of course find me on Happily Ever Photo. In Michaela Ristaino Photography on Facebook, and same on Instagram. So you will find me in all of those places. I don't do the TikTok. I don't do the Snapchat. I'm way too old for those things.